Before you judge me, let me tell you how I got here. On the night I turned 65, I thought I was headed for a nice birthday dinner. I wore my best dress, a deep emerald green, had my hair styled just so, and even put on the perfume my late husband, Robert, had gifted me years ago. But instead of the familiar warmth of a family gathering, I was handed a suitcase and a cold smile. That was just the beginning. If you think betrayal only comes from strangers, wait until it wears your last name. They say a mother's love is a quiet fire, patient and forgiving, the kind that burns brightest in the darkest of nights. I believed that. I lived that. Every scraped knee, every sleepless night, every school play. I was there for Ethan, my only son. He was my whole world, the boy who made my life feel full and bright even after his father, Robert, passed away 5 years ago. My life, post-Robert, had become a serene, predictable rhythm. Our modest home in the quiet suburbs of Seattle was my sanctuary. I had my garden, my book club, and the occasional visit from Ethan. He worked in finance, always busy, always important. He'd call a few times a week, his voice a balm to my loneliness. Though lately the calls had grown shorter, his excuses more frequent. He said work was hectic, that things with his wife, Charlotte, were tense. Still, I held on to the hope that my son, my Ethan, would never truly forget me. I woke up on my 65th birthday with a strange mix of anticipation and a faint, familiar ache. 65, the first birthday without Robert's gentle hand on my shoulder, his soft-spoken, "Happy birthday, my dear." But the thought of Ethan visiting gave me a flutter in my chest, a youthful giddiness I hadn't felt in years. I made pancakes, his favorite, and even set 2 plates at our small kitchen table. By noon, the pancakes were cold and the coffee was gone. I checked my phone a dozen times, rereading old texts just to feel some connection. My heart sank a little, but I refused to spiral. I told myself he was just busy. He'd call later. At 5 p.m., the doorbell rang. I opened it to see Ethan standing there with that boyish grin he used to wear when he wanted something, the same one I'd fallen for 100 times before. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, holding a small grocery store bouquet of lilies. I smiled, a little wobbly, and hugged him tight. The smell of his cologne was a comfort. "You came," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. He patted my back stiffly. "Of course, Mom. Now get dressed. I made reservations." I didn't even question it. I grabbed my coat, a little purse, and slid on the low heels that always pinched my toes but looked nice. I felt giddy, like a girl going to a prom for the first time. But we didn't drive toward the city or any fancy restaurant. We pulled into a long driveway lined with manicured shrubs and perfectly pruned rose bushes, a place that felt sterile and too quiet. I looked up at the sign and felt a sudden chill, a sense of foreboding that twisted my stomach into knots. The name on the sign read, "Evergreen Gardens Senior Living." "Ethan, what is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze. "Mom, we need to talk. This isn't safe anymore. Living alone, with your memory lapses." "What memory lapses?" I snapped, a sharp defensive wave washing over me. He kept talking, his voice a practiced monologue. "I've found a great place. It's safe, comfortable. You'll have people your age, activities. A nurse is here, 24/7. I laughed then, a hollow, bitter sound that held no joy. "You're kidding. You brought me here on my birthday? To an old age home?" He got out of the car and opened my door. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Let's just go inside." I refused to move, my body rigid with disbelief. That's when he opened the trunk. My suitcase was already packed, neatly placed beside his own overnight bag. I stared at it, a lump of ice forming in my throat. My favorite sweaters, my old photo albums, even Robert's silver cufflinks were all tucked away inside. "You went through my things?" I said, the words a strained gasp. Inside Evergreen Gardens, time seemed to slow to a crawl. The reception area was filled with smiling, painted faces and the cloying smell of antiseptic and overcooked vegetables. It felt like a trap, a gilded cage designed to pacify the souls within it. Ethan handed over a stack of papers to the woman at the desk. Legal papers, a transfer of power of attorney, my name, his signature. Done. He had signed away my life with the same casual indifference as he would sign a check. I didn't cry then. Not yet. I was too stunned, too numb to feel anything. I let them lead me to a small room with beige walls, a twin bed with a remote for its mechanical incline, and a single window facing a high brick wall. My birthday gift. I sat on the edge of the bed with my coat still on, the cold seeping through my bones, the hollowness in my chest a physical weight. Hours passed. The day, which had started with such hope, ended in silence. No cake, no candles, just the quiet hum of a distant air conditioner. I finally opened the bouquet he had given me. It had wilted from the car ride. The flowers looked just as I felt, crushed, discarded, and a little dead. That night, I lay awake, listening to the soft rustle of nurses' scrubs, the distant sound of a TV somewhere down the hall. The mattress was too firm, the sheets smelled of bleach, and my mind was replaying every conversation with Ethan over the past year. I tried to see the signs I'd missed, the subtle manipulations, the quiet dismissal of my feelings. I thought of all the times I said yes when I should have said no. The times I covered for him, loaned him money, made excuses to others. The moments I swallowed my disappointment because I loved him, because he was my son. But that night, I stopped defending him. Something essential cracked inside me, something deep and fundamental. The next morning, I asked a nurse for my cell phone. She smiled kindly, a professional pity in her eyes. "Your son took care of it, dear. He said the phone was too confusing for you and it's best you focus on your new life here." It was then I realized I wasn't here to be cared for. I was here to be erased. And if I didn't find a way out, they would succeed. But I wasn't as fragile as they thought. Not even close. I stopped eating for 2 days. Not to make a statement, but because the food felt like a foreign object, a bland reminder of my new reality. There's something about being treated like you're no longer useful, no longer a person, that breaks a part of you that never fully heals. I'd raised a child, built a home, loved fiercely, and now I was just a room number and a patient chart. The nurses, though mostly kind, called me sweetheart and honey as if I were a child or a 100-year-old doll. No one asked what I did before. No one asked what I loved. To them, I was just another old woman in slippers, wearing a vacant expression and forgetting things. Even though I hadn't forgotten a damn thing. My roommate, Doris, slept all day and snored all night. She didn't talk much, but when she did, it was about people who hadn't visited her in years. I listened because I knew the ache of absence too well. I tried to keep my mind sharp. I watched the news in the common room and did the crossword puzzles they left in the hallway. I reread a novel I'd already read twice before, trying to hold on to some semblance of my old self. But something inside me was sinking deeper, darker. The silence was louder than any noise, and the loneliness was a tangible presence, a suffocating blanket I couldn't shake off. I had a choice. Let the darkness consume me, or find a way to become a ghost, a specter of my former self, to haunt the life they had tried to steal. On the 4th day, as the stale air of Evergreen Gardens threatened to suffocate what little spirit I had left, I met Lena. She wasn't supposed to be working that day. A nurse called in sick, and Lena, young and bright with braids pinned up under her scrub cap and a genuine kindness in her eyes, filled in. She was checking my vitals when she said, "You don't belong here." I looked at her, startled, my heart giving a little jolt. It was the first honest thing anyone had said to me since I arrived. She smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Don't get me wrong, a lot of folks need help, and that's okay, but you don't seem lost. I blinked away the sudden sting in my eyes. A wave of raw emotion, a mixture of gratitude and sorrow, threatened to overwhelm me. We got to talking. She asked about my family, about my life before this place. I told her what I could, without completely falling apart, leaving out the most painful parts, the parts that involved my son's betrayal. She listened, not just nodded, but really listened, her gaze steady and empathetic. Later that day, she came back with something in her hand. This belonged to Mr. Henley, a resident who passed away last week, she whispered, her voice low and conspiratorial. We found it tucked inside a Bible. No one claimed it. She unfolded the small piece of paper. It was a lottery ticket, a little yellowed and dated 2 weeks earlier. I chuckled, a dry, brittle sound that felt foreign in my own ears. And you want me to try my luck? She winked. Hey, the world owes you something. The suggestion seemed absurd, a childish fantasy in this grim reality. I didn't plan to do it, not at first. It felt silly, but boredom and desperation are strange bedfellows. That night, after the nurses had done their final rounds and the hallway was quiet, I slipped out of my room and made my way to the lounge. I sat down at one of the facility's ancient desktops, its screen flickering with a dull light, and typed in the numbers. My hand, trembling slightly, hovered over the keyboard. As the numbers appeared on the screen, my breath hitched. My eyes scanned the page, again and again, refusing to believe what they were seeing. 100 million. My heart hammered against my ribs, a wild drumbeat in the deafening silence of the room. I covered my mouth with both hands, a gasp escaping into the sterile air. I looked around. No one was there. The silence that followed was deafening. But it wasn't a silence of peace. It was a silence of pure electric fear. If Ethan found out, if anyone found out. I quickly printed the confirmation, folded it into a small square, and tucked it deep inside my bra, a secret against my skin. The next day, I called Lena aside. I need to talk to someone privately, I whispered. Someone legal. She didn't ask why. She just nodded, her eyes full of understanding. Lena knew someone, a volunteer attorney, who came by twice a month to help seniors with wills and things like that. His name was Ben Carter. I waited with my heart pounding until he arrived that Friday. He was young, sharp, and most importantly, discreet. We sat in the tiny break room, the air thick with the smell of old coffee and bleach. I slid him the lottery confirmation and whispered, "Can you help me disappear?" His eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't flinch. "We'll need to move fast," he said, his voice calm and steady, a stark contrast to my internal turmoil. The next few hours were a blur of paperwork, notarizations, financial transfers, a new phone, and a temporary mailing address. Ben contacted an independent financial advisor who set up a blind trust. My name was nowhere visible. Ethan would never see a cent. I signed a new will, leaving everything to a charitable trust for the time being. Ethan had already signed away my life once. I wouldn't let him do it again. Lena hugged me on the night I left. "Don't forget us when you're free," she whispered. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I was too focused, too numb to the emotions that once governed my life. I slipped away just before dawn, wearing clothes that weren't mine, carrying a duffel with only the essentials. They thought I was senile, broken, alone. But I was about to become a ghost with $100 million. Let them look for me. They'd never see me coming. The bus ride out of Seattle was long, quiet, and cold. I sat near the back, hood up, sunglasses on, clutching that duffel bag like it held my soul. In many ways, it did. I didn't know exactly where I was going. All I knew was that I had to get far enough away that no one could find me. Not Ethan, not his wife Charlotte, not the lawyers he'd likely already called. Ben had helped me purchase a modest house under a new trust name in rural Oregon. Something off the grid, but livable. No cameras, no neighbors too close. Just enough distance between me and the life I was leaving behind. When we crossed the Oregon border, I exhaled for the first time in what felt like days. Freedom had a taste, and it wasn't sweet. It was metallic, like blood and fear. The house was nothing fancy. A single-story brick structure with chipped paint and a crooked mailbox. But it had a working heater, clean water, and most importantly, silence. Not the kind you get in a nursing home, surrounded by people who have given up. This was the kind of silence that let you breathe. The next few days, I lived like a shadow. I cooked simple meals, walked to the mailbox, sat on the porch wrapped in an old quilt, watching the wind carry dead leaves across the yard. I checked the news obsessively, half expecting my name to appear in bold letters. Missing woman wins $100 million. Son claims mental instability. But there was nothing. Not yet. I kept the lottery ticket in a fireproof box under the floorboards in the hallway closet. Alongside it, the new will, a burner phone, and a note addressed to whomever finds this, just in case. One morning, about a week after I left Evergreen Gardens, the quiet shattered. A knock at the door. I froze. I hadn't told a soul where I was. My heart beat like a war drum in my chest. I tiptoed to the window and peeked. Just a delivery man. Groceries. Part of the arrangement Ben had set up. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. That afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I created a fake social media profile and searched for Ethan. There he was, smiling in his profile picture like the world hadn't fallen apart. In his latest post, he wrote, "If anyone has seen my mother, Eleanor Vance, please contact me or the Seattle police. She's been missing for several days. We're worried about her safety." Beneath it, hundreds of comments poured in. Prayers, condolences, people praising Ethan for being such a good son. I laughed so hard I cried, the sound a mixture of hysteria and disbelief. Oh, they had no idea. None. But what truly broke me wasn't the post. It was the photo he used. It wasn't recent. It was from 5 years ago, one of the last birthdays we celebrated together before Robert passed. I had a sparkly party hat on, and he had his arm around me. We looked happy. How easy it is to perform love in pictures. That night, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts went in circles, and the longer I sat with them, the darker they became. I was done being controlled. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. I remembered every time I'd given Ethan money. Every loan, every lie. I remembered how he had subtly but surely gaslit me over the years. He'd say things like, "You told me that already," when I hadn't, or "You're forgetting more and more these days." I thought I was just aging poorly. I thought it was my fault. It wasn't. He wanted me to doubt myself, to question my own mind, so that when he finally moved to take control of my life, I wouldn't resist. Well, I was done being controlled. I was done being a victim. The war hadn't just begun. It was a war that had been raging for years, and I had been fighting on the wrong side. The next morning, I called Ben from a burner number. "I need you to update my will again," I said, my voice steady, devoid of the tremor it had held just a few days ago. He didn't ask why. He simply said, "What changes?" "I want to make it very clear," I said, a cold, hard resolve settling in my stomach. "Ethan Vance receives absolutely nothing. Not a dollar, not a keepsake, not a memory." "Done," he said. "You're safe now, Eleanor." But I wasn't. Not yet. Because deep down, I knew something was coming, and I needed to be ready for it. My revenge wasn't just about money or freedom anymore. It was about exposing the truth, about making him feel the fear he had so carelessly inflicted upon me. My first move came in the form of a simple letter, a plain envelope, no return address, tucked in among the utility bills and junk mail that Ben's service forwarded to my new address. I wouldn't have noticed it if not for the paper. It was heavier than usual, expensive, with a faint watermark. My stomach turned the second I touched it. Inside was a single sheet, a photocopy of what looked like a loan document. My signature, or what looked like it, was on it. Below it, two others. One from my late husband, Robert, and another from Ethan. It was a dubious personal loan dated 12 years ago, taken out in both Robert's name and mine. The bank's logo was real. So was the notary stamp. But I had never signed that paper. Never. I sat down on the worn sofa, the letter trembling in my hands. The document had my handwriting, down to the small, distinctive loop in the E of my name. But something about it was off, too clean, too practiced. My husband would never have hidden a loan like that. And Ethan, he never said a word. A chilling realization slithered through me. I pulled out the fireproof box I kept hidden under the floorboards. Retrieving the older file folder, Ben had helped me compile a collection of past financial documents we salvaged before I left. Inside, I found 3 more forms, all with my forged signature. A cold dread settled over me. Ethan had been stealing from me and Robert for years. It explained the strange tension in our final years together. The way Robert avoided certain financial topics. How we suddenly had less money. How Ethan always seemed to need cash for an emergency, but drove a newer car every year. The quiet arguments at night that I thought were about Robert's work. The canceled vacation plans. The bad investments. I'd blamed aging, the market, a general turn of luck. But it was Ethan. All along. I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I opened my laptop and began digging deeper. Over the next 3 days, I pieced it all together. Ethan had falsified several loan documents using Robert's social security number and mine. The amounts varied. Some were small personal loans. Others had been quietly rolled into debt collections. Robert must have covered most of it before he died, taking the shame and the financial burden with him. But one account, still active, showed a ballooning balance of over $500,000. And it had defaulted under my name just 3 months before I was dropped at Evergreen Gardens. I sat in the darkness of that little Oregon living room, the screen glowing in front of me, my hands clenched so tight my knuckles ached. This wasn't just betrayal. This was theft, fraud, criminal. I reached out to Ben again. "I have new information," I told him, my voice flat, almost robotic. "Forged documents, loans. Ethan did it." "I believe you," he said calmly. "Do you want to press charges?" "Not yet," I said. I wasn't ready. Not because I had doubts. No, those were gone. Replaced by a searing clarity. I wasn't ready because I wanted him to feel the fear first, the silence, the not knowing. I wanted him to wonder if I knew. Because the truth was, I wasn't hiding anymore. I was hunting. I began gathering every document I could, every account tied to my name, every old email, every financial notice Ethan once sent on my behalf. I even contacted our old bank and requested records under a legal pretext Ben helped me draft. Piece by piece, the puzzle formed, and what it revealed made my blood run cold. Ethan had taken out a high-interest loan against the small catering business Robert and I had co-founded back in the 80s, a venture we ran from our garage in those early years. He used that LLC, which was still technically active, to secure a $200,000 line of credit. He signed it using Robert's name 2 years after Robert had died. That wasn't just a moral failing, that was federal fraud. I saved everything to an encrypted folder, backed it up, and printed a copy to store in the box beneath the floorboards. I wasn't sure how long I had. Because if Ethan was as desperate as I suspected, and if he had even the slightest clue that I had vanished with $100 million, he'd be coming for me soon. Have you ever looked at someone you loved your entire life and realized you never truly knew them? That's what it felt like. Scrolling through pages of documents that tied my son to a trail of deceit so long and tangled, it made my stomach churn. The boy I once rocked to sleep in my arms had grown into a stranger. And not just any stranger, a dangerous one. By now, I had confirmed everything. Ethan had forged my signature, lied to banks, manipulated my late husband into covering for him, and worst of all, he had done it all behind the mask of a devoted son. But the darkest truth came through a simple search buried in a public database. With a little help from Ben's access, I found it. Ethan Vance, currently under federal investigation for fraudulent tax filings, embezzlement, and identity misuse. Identity misuse. That one hit hardest. I clicked on the case file, my fingers trembling. The details were mostly redacted, but the accusations were clear. Ethan had been creating false identities, inflating incomes, falsifying deductions, and submitting returns to siphon money through refunds. Some of those identities were deceased. Some were elderly. Some were real people, including me. The IRS had flagged several returns filed in my name over the past 3 years. I had no idea. I stared at the screen, my mind in a spiral. Had he planned to take my money from the beginning? Was this the reason he was so quick to shove me into a facility and shut down my phone? It wasn't concern. It was containment. He wanted to keep me silent, disoriented, and out of the way. He had weaponized my identity, used my name as a tool for his schemes, and when the heat came down, he'd planned to put me away like a loose end in a messy story. Only now, I wasn't just a loose end. I was the one holding the thread. I didn't call the police. Not yet. Instead, I started documenting everything. Every lie, every loan, every forged line on a piece of paper. I printed them, filed them in manila folders, labeled them with dates. I began recording audio notes. Not because I was scared of forgetting, but because I wanted my voice to be the last one in the room if anything happened to me. Then I made a choice. I mailed a copy of the entire file anonymously to the Department of Justice. Not to make a statement, not yet, but to plant a seed. They'd have the evidence. If something ever happened to me, they'd know where to look. Still, I couldn't stop the feeling that he knew. I started noticing cars parked longer than usual near the house. Once a man knocked on the door, claiming he was doing a survey of the neighborhood. I didn't open it, just watched from behind the curtain, phone in hand. Every knock, every ring, made me jump. But still, I didn't run. Not this time. I made another call to Ben. "We need to finalize the trust," I said. "The will, too. I want everything protected." He agreed. We set it all up in my new name with layers of legal insulation. If Ethan ever tried to claim a cent, he'd be bounced out of every court in the country. But as much as I tried to shield myself with paper and strategy, the emotional blow hit in the quietest moments. I'd sit at night and remember Ethan, as a boy, his laugh, his scraped knees, the way he used to fall asleep on my chest. I'd remember the teenage years when things got harder, but I never gave up on him. The college calls, the sudden silences, the growing distance. How did I miss it? How long had he been slipping away while I kept holding on? Maybe that's the worst kind of betrayal, the one you watch unfold in slow motion, always hoping it's something else. But now I knew, and I wasn't going to let him rewrite the end of my story, because for the first time in my life, I held the pen. The letter came in a plain white envelope, no return address. But the moment I saw the handwriting, I knew. Ethan had always written in sharp, slanted strokes, as if even his pen couldn't wait to be done with whatever he was doing. Inside was a single sentence. "I know what you did, and this isn't over." I read it twice, 3 times. Then I laughed. not out of amusement, but because it was the exact kind of arrogance I expected from him. "No, I miss you. No. Where are you?" Just a threat. He knew I was gone, and he knew it was intentional. I folded the letter neatly and slid it into my growing folder of evidence. By now, I'd been gone almost 3 weeks. Ethan had launched what looked like a public campaign of concern, begging for information on social media, giving interviews to local news stations, playing the role of the heartbroken son, searching for his confused and vulnerable mother. He posted old photos of us together, pictures from a time when our smiles were real, when our love felt uncomplicated. It would have been comical if it weren't so chilling. I watched one of his interviews from my little Oregon living room, the flickering television screen, a stark contrast to my quiet life. He dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief, his voice cracking just the right amount as he spoke of his deep concern. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness. Only a cold, clinical curiosity about how far he would go. And then, just as I feared, he made his move. A letter arrived from the King County Courthouse in Seattle official. Certified. A thick envelope that felt heavy with impending doom. I signed for it with trembling hands and sat down to open it at the kitchen table. He had filed a petition to have me declared mentally incapacitated. I couldn't breathe. The document included statements from 2 people claiming I'd shown erratic and confused behavior over the past year. One was a former neighbor, the other his old college friend, someone I barely knew. Ethan's lawyer had submitted audio clips, 2 snippets of old voicemails I'd left when I was distressed, lonely, or simply venting. Chopped and edited, they made me sound unwell, unstable, the words completely stripped of their original context. He even attached a letter from a psychiatrist, one I'd never met, claiming concern over my disappearing and paranoid behavior. They wanted the court to freeze my accounts, to seize control of the trust, to drag me back. I felt like the air had been punched from my lungs. Ben came that same night. He read everything, his expression unreadable. "We've got work to do," he finally said. "But Eleanor, you need to be calm. You need to stay sharp. They're counting on panic." I nodded, too numb to cry. The next few days moved like a storm. Ben contacted an experienced litigator to help us prepare. We gathered documents, video call logs, financial statements, even a daily journal I had started keeping to prove I had been of sound mind every single day since I left. We scheduled an independent psychiatric evaluation. The doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Levine, came to the house and spent 3 hours with me. She asked about my childhood, my late husband, Ethan. I told her everything. She didn't pity me. She listened. She asked real questions. And when she left, she touched my hand and said, "You're one of the most lucid people I've seen this week." It felt like the first clean breath I'd taken in weeks. Still, the pressure mounted. News of the hearing leaked. The internet, which had briefly sympathized with Ethan's missing mother saga, began to shift. Questions arose. Why hadn't she contacted anyone? Was she unstable? Was someone else pulling the strings? The media loves a mystery, and Ethan knew how to feed them one. But I wasn't afraid anymore, because now I had more than just proof. I had purpose. In the quiet of my small home, I began preparing a video statement. I didn't publish it yet, but I wanted to be ready just in case they tried to silence me. I looked into the camera and said, "My name is Eleanor Vance. I am of sound mind, and I was betrayed by the person I trusted most." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just told the truth, because I knew what was coming. And this time, I wouldn't be the one on trial. The courthouse in Seattle hadn't changed since the last time I'd passed through it years ago, when I paid a parking ticket and sat in a room full of people hoping to forget their mistakes. Back then, I was a wife, a mother, someone who believed in giving people second chances. Now I was the accused. Ben had advised me to dress simple but strong, something that said, "I'm not here to beg, I'm here to be heard." I wore a navy blue coat with silver buttons, Robert's old watch, and a pair of sensible heels that clicked defiantly with each step through the courthouse halls. Ethan was already seated at the front of the courtroom when I arrived. He stood as I entered, a perfect performance, a mask of concern draped over his face. He even offered a smile, the kind that strangers would interpret as warmth, but I saw it for what it was. He was here to bury me. The judge, an older woman with tired eyes, introduced the case. In the matter of Eleanor Vance's mental competency, the words hung in the air like smoke. Ethan's attorney went first, a tall man with a polished voice and too much confidence. He laid it all out like a script. Eleanor had gone missing. Eleanor was behaving erratically. Eleanor was possibly being manipulated. Eleanor was a danger to herself and her finances. He introduced the psychiatrist's letter from the doctor I'd never met and presented those audio clips, edited and spliced like a horror reel. I listened to myself sound scattered, desperate, even unstable, taken completely out of context. I saw the judge's eyebrows rise. My hands clenched around the armrest, but I remained still. Then Ethan spoke. "Your Honor," he said, his voice trembling just the right amount. "I love my mother. I really do. This is the hardest thing I've ever done. But I believe she's being taken advantage of. She's not herself. She's lost." That's when I stood. "My turn, Your Honor." The judge nodded. I walked slowly to the stand, pausing just enough to let the weight of my presence settle. Then I spoke. "My name is Eleanor Vance. I am 65 years old. I am not mentally impaired. I am not lost, and I am not anyone's victim." I opened my folder methodically, carefully, and handed a copy of Dr. Levine's full psychiatric report to the judge, signed, dated, and certified. The verdict: completely sound mind, no indicators of cognitive decline, emotionally stable. I watched the attorney's shoulders tense. Ethan's face twitched, the mask beginning to crack. Then I continued. "I have here," I said, lifting a second folder, a log of every phone call I made the week before I left, receipts for the transfer of funds to a legal trust, medical records clean, and a signed affidavit from the attorney who helped me exit the facility, stating I was lucid, logical, and in full control of my decisions. I paused, my gaze unwavering as I looked directly at Ethan. "And I also have something else," I said, my voice dropping to a low, cold whisper. "But I won't be presenting that today. Not unless I need to. I didn't show the file, the one with every fraudulent signature, every stolen loan, every manipulated tax document Ethan ever touched. That was my ace. Instead, I turned back to the judge. He put me in a facility without my consent," I said, my voice growing stronger. "He took my phone, took my freedom, and now he wants to take what little I have left, my voice, my independence, my dignity. Don't let him." The courtroom was still. Ben sat beside me, silent but steady. His eyes met mine, proud but not surprised. The judge leaned back, her thumb tapping the file. "I need time to review all documents and the medical evaluation," she said slowly. "The court will reconvene in 2 weeks. 2 weeks." Ethan turned toward me as the session ended. He tried to catch my eye, but I didn't give him the satisfaction. He left the courtroom with clenched fists and a jaw set tight. His mask was cracking, and I walked out with my head held high. The war wasn't over, but for the first time, I knew I could win it. 2 weeks. That's how long the judge gave us. But Ethan didn't waste a single day. Within hours of leaving the courthouse, he doubled down on his public campaign. The local news ran a new segment. Missing mother reappears in court. Son fears exploitation. Ethan spoke directly to the camera, eyes moist, voice shaking just enough. "I just want to make sure my mother is safe," he said. "She's been through a lot. She's not thinking clearly, and I'm afraid there are people around her with bad intentions." I watched the broadcast from my living room, arms folded, jaw tight. There were no bad people around me. Just me. Just Eleanor Vance. The woman who raised him, who sacrificed, who forgave more than any mother should. And he had the audacity to paint me as a puppet. That was the moment I knew. The silent war I had declared in my heart was no longer enough. I needed to act. I called Ben and asked him to come by. When he arrived, I handed him the sealed envelope with every document I had collected. The fraudulent loans, the forged signatures, the tax returns Ethan had filed under my name. "Send it," I said. "Not to the court, to the Department of Justice, anonymously." He opened the envelope, flipped through the pages, and nodded slowly. This will get their attention." "I'm counting on it," I replied, a chilling calmness in my voice, but I wasn't done. That night, using one of my new aliases and a fresh online account, I made a sizable donation, $5 million, to a national nonprofit organization that protects elderly individuals from financial abuse. No name attached, just the transfer. It was a silent statement, a ghost in the machine. Within a week, they launched a campaign using my case as a symbol. They didn't name me, but the timing was too perfect. People started whispering, sharing, questioning. How does a mother vanish, then reappear with money, but her own son tries to lock her away? Comments flooded social media. "Something's off with the son. Let her speak. Why hasn't anyone asked her side? I don't trust him." Ethan's carefully constructed image began to wobble. Then, a break I hadn't expected. A journalist from a major newspaper, Sarah, reached out to Ben. She wanted to hear my side of the story. She promised discretion. No names, no photos, just the truth. I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe 2 towns over. I wore sunglasses and a hat. We sat in a corner booth. The low hum of conversation, a backdrop to my confession. She hit record and let me talk. I told her about the facility, about being dropped there without warning, about Ethan taking my phone, my accounts, my dignity. I didn't mention the lottery. Not yet. When she asked about the court case, I simply said, "He's trying to take control of my life." The story ran 2 days later. Mother or millionaire? The silencing of Eleanor V. It didn't take long for the dots to connect. People online began speculating. Was the missing mother actually the anonymous donor? Was this why her son wanted her declared incompetent? More whispers, more doubts. And still, I remained quiet. Because Ethan's downfall wouldn't come from an accusation. It would come from a reckoning. 2 days before the court reconvened, Ben received a call. It was from the Department of Justice. They had received our anonymous file, and they were opening a case. Ethan didn't know it yet, but while he was building a castle of lies with courtrooms and cameras, I was setting fire to the foundation, and the flames were getting higher. The second hearing felt colder, not because of the weather, though the Oregon wind had turned cruel that week, but because something had shifted in the air around us. Ethan walked into the courtroom looking less confident this time. His shoulders weren't quite as high. His lawyer whispered urgently as they took their seats. They'd seen the article. They'd seen the shift online. They were feeling the cracks. I sat calmly, my folder of documents neatly tucked into my lap. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry. Not the kind of anger that lashes out, but the kind that sharpens into precision. This time we went first. Ben opened with a statement that silenced the courtroom. "Your Honor," he began, "since the last hearing, we've completed a full independent psychiatric evaluation. submitted detailed financial logs proving Mrs. Vance's independence and coherence, and have discovered through legitimate public records that the petitioner, Mr. Ethan Vance, is currently under federal investigation for multiple financial crimes, including identity misuse and tax fraud. He handed the judge a copy of the public case docket. Ethan's attorney stood up immediately, protesting. That investigation has no bearing on. The judge held up a hand. Sit down. The courtroom held its breath. Then came the real blow. Dr. Levine, my independent evaluator, took the stand. Calm, intelligent, direct. She confirmed that I was not only mentally competent, but emotionally sound and fully aware of my decisions, including my choice to leave the nursing home. She's not only clear, doctor, Levine said. She's deliberate, thoughtful. There is no medical basis for any declaration of incompetence. I looked at Ethan then. His hands were gripping the table so tightly his knuckles were white. His mask, that carefully constructed facade of concern, was unraveling by the second. Ben then presented our final piece of evidence, a timeline. It showed exactly when Ethan attempted to seize control of my accounts and how that perfectly coincided with large withdrawals he made from his own failing business. Coincidence? Hardly. The judge reviewed everything in silence. Ethan was offered the opportunity to respond. He stood, his voice cracked. "My mother is sick," he said, pleading, his eyes darting between me and the judge. "She's clearly being manipulated by someone. She wouldn't act like this unless she was confused or unstable. This isn't her." I stood then, and I faced him directly. "I am her," I said, my voice ringing with a cold, clear authority. Everyone went still. "I am the woman who stayed up with you when you had the flu at age 6, who gave up vacations, who pawned jewelry to pay for your college classes, who cooked your favorite meal even when I couldn't afford groceries for myself. I am her, and you left me in a facility like I was nothing." I turned to the judge. "And now, Your Honor, I ask you to let me prove that I am not nothing." The judge leaned forward, steepling her fingers, and spoke slowly. "Mrs. Vance, based on the overwhelming evidence provided, your psychiatric evaluation, and the inconsistencies in the petitioner's claims, I am dismissing this case. Your financial accounts and personal autonomy are fully restored. This court recognizes you as competent and independent." I didn't cry, but my hands trembled slightly as I picked up my papers and walked out of the courtroom. Ethan didn't say a word as I passed. His eyes were wild, not with anger, with fear. He knew it was over, at least this part. But what he didn't know was that while he'd spent weeks trying to prove I was unstable, I'd been building something far more powerful than a defense. A legacy. And I wasn't done yet. The phone call came just after midnight. Ben's voice was tense, but steady. "It happened," he said, his words cutting through the silence of my little house. "The DOJ opened formal proceedings. Ethan's name is on the docket." I didn't speak. I just sat there in the dark, staring out at the wind, shifting the trees beyond my window. A part of me had been waiting for this moment, had meticulously planned for it, had hunted for it. But now that it had come, it didn't feel victorious. It felt inevitable. The next morning, the world caught up. The media swarmed first. Ethan Vance, son of recently spotlighted elder abuse case. Under federal investigation. My name wasn't mentioned, not directly, but the dots were too close not to connect. People remembered the missing mother, the court battle, the anonymous donor, the frail woman who disappeared but stood strong in court weeks later. Now their perfect son was unraveling, and they wanted to hear from me. I stayed quiet for 2 days, turned off the TV, ignored the phone. I cooked myself breakfast, watched the birds peck at the frost-bitten yard, and sat with a pen in hand, writing letters I never intended to send. But silence wasn't justice. It was time. I reached out to Sarah, the journalist who had met me in secret weeks earlier. I told her I was ready to speak, this time on camera. No aliases, no more shadows. We scheduled the interview for the following Friday, a national news full feature. She asked if I was sure. "I've never been more sure," I said. The day of the interview, I dressed simply. A gray sweater, small silver earrings, no makeup, no stylist, just the unvarnished truth. We sat across from each other in a quiet studio, the lights soft and warm. Sarah leaned forward. "Eleanor, the world knows the headlines. They've read about Ethan, about the case. But what they don't know is the heart of it. Why now?" I looked directly into the camera, my gaze steady and unflinching. "Because it's not just about me," I said. "It's about every parent who gave everything and was thrown away. Every older adult dismissed, erased, or locked up under the excuse of love. I was almost one of them, and I won't be quiet anymore." Then I told my story. The nursing home, the lottery ticket, the lies I uncovered, the file I sent. I left out nothing. Sarah's eyes welled as I spoke, but I didn't cry. I was done crying. That night, the interview aired. Millions watched, messages poured in. People from across the country sharing their own stories of betrayal, abandonment, and survival. I wasn't just Eleanor anymore. I was a mirror. Ethan didn't speak publicly, but sources close to him said he was devastated, that his life was falling apart. Good. He built that life on manipulation, and now it was collapsing under the weight of his own cruelty. But I didn't gloat. Instead, I got to work. I made plans to launch a foundation, one that would protect elders from legal and financial abuse. Not in name only, but with real legal support, real funding, real advocacy. I named it the Eleanor Project, because if they were going to use my name to strip me of dignity, I was going to use it to give dignity back. Still, the pain lingered. Not because Ethan was suffering, but because I had once loved him with a kind of loyalty that blinded me. And now, I had to learn how to live without that illusion. But I had something better now. I had the truth, and no one could take that from me again. Ethan's arrest didn't come with sirens. It came with headlines. Ethan Vance indicted on multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and tax evasion. I read the news on a quiet morning with my tea in hand, and my cat curled beside me. The house was still, except for the steady hum of the refrigerator and the wind brushing against the shutters. For a long time, I just stared at the article. Not because I didn't believe it, I did, but because I had imagined this moment so many times that when it finally came, it almost felt like déjà vu. He was out on bond, of course. Money can buy time even when it can't buy peace. But the damage was done. His name had become synonymous with betrayal. Former clients pulled their business. His credit lines were frozen. Friends were gone. Even his wife, Charlotte, had issued a statement through a lawyer. She was filing for divorce. He was alone now. I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was hollow. The thing about surviving betrayal is that it doesn't leave you whole. It leaves you wiser. Yes, sharper, stronger maybe, but something soft dies in you, that blind trust, that belief, that love is enough to keep someone loyal. I didn't grieve that softness. I buried it. It was a chilly Saturday when I walked into the town center for the first time since the interview aired. People recognized me. They didn't whisper. They didn't stare. They smiled. One woman, maybe in her 40s, touched my arm and said, "You gave my mom courage to leave a bad situation." A young man behind the pharmacy counter slipped a note into my prescription bag. "My grandma says thank you. I didn't seek this attention, but it came gently, like sunlight through heavy clouds." Ben stopped by that afternoon. "They offered him a deal," he said. 10 years if he pleads guilty. If not, it goes to trial. And he? I asked. He's still pretending it's all some misunderstanding. He thinks he can outsmart the system. I shook my head. He's been pretending his whole life. Ben hesitated. He still hasn't tried to contact you? I met his eyes. Not directly, but I had received something. A letter in an unmarked envelope slid under my front door one evening while I was in the kitchen. Inside, a photograph. It was from my 60th birthday, me in a yellow sweater, laughing with cake on my face, Ethan beside me holding the knife, laughing too. On the back, just one sentence in his handwriting. You always believed in me. I'm sorry that wasn't enough. I sat with that photo for hours. Not crying, not raging, just remembering. Remembering the boy who asked for one more bedtime story. The teenager who drove my car into a mailbox and cried when I didn't yell. The man who hugged me tighter than usual the day his father died. They were all parts of him, and I loved them. But love, true love, demands truth. And Ethan chose lies. That night, I burned the photo in the fireplace. Not out of hate, out of release. I watched the flames curl around the paper, blacken the edges, erase the smile. I didn't need a picture to remember. I needed peace. And I was almost there. The morning I returned to Evergreen Gardens, the sky was pale gray, the kind that softens the world without hiding it. I stood outside the facility for a long moment, staring at the very place where I'd been left like luggage. The front doors opened, and Lena stepped out before I could knock. She gasped when she saw me. Oh my God, Eleanor. I smiled. It's me. We hugged, not politely, not briefly, but like two people who had both survived something. Her arms were warm, and I realized how long it had been since I'd felt safe in someone's embrace. Inside, the place looked different. The floors were freshly waxed. The lights were brighter. The common room had new books, a better television, and real coffee brewing in the corner. I heard what you did, Lena said, leading me to a quiet bench in the hallway. The donations, the interviews. Eleanor, you changed everything. No, I said. I just stopped letting people decide who I was. We walked the halls together. I visited Doris's old room. It was now a reading lounge. The staff looked up, some smiling, some stunned. A few residents recognized me. I nodded to each of them. They weren't invisible anymore, and neither was I. That afternoon, I gave a speech in the new activities room. There were folding chairs set up, and the staff had made cookies. Lena introduced me like I was someone famous, but I shook my head. I'm not here because I'm rich, I began. And I'm not here because I was wronged. I'm here because I was silenced. And I know how many of you still feel that way. Every pair of eyes watched me. Some welled with tears. I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me a long time ago, I said. You are not a burden. You are not forgotten. And you are not finished. Applause followed. Soft at first, then louder. I smiled, feeling the weight of every lonely night I had ever spent now, replaced by something warmer, something full. When I returned home, I finalized the trust. The Eleanor Project would become a national organization, offering legal and financial advocacy for elders in danger of being exploited. We'd hire attorneys, launch hotlines, build partnerships with senior care facilities and courts. Ethan, he took the deal. 10 years. He tried to send another letter. I returned it unopened. That chapter was closed. I spent the final days of the year writing letters to every person who helped me. Ben, Lena, even Dr. Levine. I thanked them not for saving me, but for standing beside me while I saved myself. And then, on the first snow of January, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I wrote a letter to myself. It was short, just one page. I read it aloud as I sat by the fireplace, The cat curled at my feet. Dear Eleanor, you weren't crazy. You weren't too trusting. You weren't weak. You were just a woman who loved too deeply. I paused, my voice catching slightly. And when they tried to write you out of your own life, you picked up the pen and wrote the ending yourself. I am so proud of you. With love, yourself. I folded the letter, placed it in a small wooden box, and set it on the mantel. I didn't need a legacy of money or revenge or even justice. I had something greater. Freedom. And for the first time in my life, I was finally, fully, completely free. The journey I have shared with you is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It's a story not just of betrayal and revenge, but of rediscovering your own worth. For so long, I allowed my identity to be defined by my roles as a wife, a mother, a caregiver. I lost myself in the process of giving, forgetting that I, too, was a person worthy of love, respect, and independence. The most painful part of my story was not the betrayal itself, but the realization that I had enabled it. I was so blinded by my love for my son that I ignored the red flags, dismissed my own instincts, and made myself small to make him feel big. But you don't have to. You are not a burden. You are not forgotten. And you are absolutely not finished. Your life has value and meaning, far beyond your relationship with anyone else. The betrayal you may face, the loneliness you may feel, does not diminish your worth. It's a test, a turning point. It is an opportunity to pick up the pen and write the rest of your story. My revenge wasn't about hurting Ethan. It was about healing myself. It was about proving to myself, and to anyone who feels invisible, that our voices matter. Your voice matters. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, I encourage you to share your own experiences in the comments below. Let's build a community where our stories can be heard, where we can support each other, and where no one has to feel alone. Remember to subscribe for more stories of resilience and redemption. Your support helps us continue to share these powerful messages with those who need to hear them most.